The speech you are about to hear was delivered by Professor Barrows Dunham to the audience of 2,000 teachers and others who attended the 17th Annual Educational Conference of the Teachers Union of the City of New York, held at the Hotel Commodore on March 28, 1953. A few weeks earlier, Professor Dunham, author of the widely known book Man Against Myth and the recently published Giant in Chains, had appeared as a so-called uncooperative witness before Congressman Veldy's Un-American Activities Committee. As a result, he was suspended by the president of Temple University, where he had for 10 years held the position of chairman of the Department of Philosophy. In response to many requests that Professor Dunham's speech be made available in permanent form, the Teachers Union has made this record from a tape recording of his message. Professor Dunham.
I learned the other day of a remark overheard on a Philadelphia trolley. They spent all that money and all they got was a philosopher. I must say that I think this the sagest observation yet made upon recent events. It puts them in historical perspective with a most judicious estimate of the values involved. A month ago, I was a man. I have now become a case. Perhaps I may be entitled to say, speaking of course as neuter gender, that in Philadelphia, truth rides the trolleys. What happens to a philosopher when he becomes a case? There is some precedent for it, as witness Socrates and Bruno and Spinoza. They were men stubborn in the midst of hostile circumstances, who so managed their collision with events as to leave ideals unshattered. In the history of philosophy, there is also precedent for a more sinuous adaptation. Descartes spent 20 years in Holland and Locke 5 as intellectual refugees. I don't think their stature is much diminished by their sinuosity, but the Socratic manner seems somehow nobler and better. Which of these paths you follow depends a good deal on powers not under your control. If the attack can be anticipated, you may step aside without much loss of character. But if the attack comes directly, then you must stand and fight. I think that this was my condition. The alternatives offered me constituted really no choice at all. I could either repudiate my past and my principles, confess myself a fool or a knave, and name names, or I could defend my past and my principles, and with them the integrity of the teaching profession. The first of these alternatives had as little power as if it did not exist, and I followed the second with an ease which seemed almost mechanical. The second path was not without its thorns. I will not pretend not to have known anxiety and uncertain sleep. And the day and a half's waiting in Washington while the dread but undetermined moment approached was no easeful stimulation of the nerves.